One of the dangers for inexperienced researchers in applied research, especially in the field of education, is that the research you undertake remains a simple evaluation of a program or an intervention or simply reflective practice. For instance, you report the findings of a change to your teaching practice or the improvement in your students' performance after you introduce a new style of teaching. While this may be important information and very interesting, it is crucial for you to look to ways to lift the quality and the rigour of your research so that it becomes more scholarly. Obviously, linking your research to previous research goes a step towards this. The review of the literature serves to identify the major concepts associated with your topic. It also presents the most current research in your area. It provides examples of research that people have undertaken similar to yours, and it gives you some insight into the methods adopted by others. However, just comparing your study to past research is not enough. One way to add this academic rigour to your study is to use a theoretical or conceptual framework to help guide your design. And it also helps you analyse and interpret your results. A theoretical framework is a broad theory-based explanation for the behaviours, the actions, the opinions and the attitudes of interest to your research. For example, if you're interested in understanding student involvement in volunteering organisations, then you might use social exchange theory to guide your study. If you're studying the use of iPads by university students, then activity theory might be appropriate for you to use. Finding an appropriate theory is tricky, but the aim is to find theory that involves all of the concepts you wish to explore. If you're interested in how individuals understand or behave, then look in the psychology literature for possible theories. If you're studying groups or organisations, look in the sociological literature. If you're studying individuals and groups, look in the social psychological literature. Different fields, different disciplines will have different theories. An alternative approach is to use a philosophical perspective to guide your research. A philosophical perspective is a lens which guides the researcher in their choice of topic and informs the researcher about which issues are important. The philosophical lens approach can also determine the way your information is collected and presented. There are a variety of philosophical perspectives that you could adopt. For instance, a critical theory perspective is concerned with empowering people to overcome the constraints placed on them by gender, class and ethnicity. A key focus of postmodern critical theorists is that they politicise problems, meaning that they see the problems of society based in the political structures in which they occur, and therefore they focus on those. Another common perspective is feminist research. Feminist researchers aim to understand the nature of gender inequality and examine women's social roles and their experiences. Feminist researchers tend to hold firm to two principles. Firstly, research should focus on the condition of women in society. And secondly, research must be grounded in the assumption that women generally experience subordination in society. There are numerous other philosophical lenses that could be used. A third way you could raise the scholarly level of your work is to adopt an inductive approach to your research. Instead of theory being the starting point or framework for your study, the creation of a theory or explanation is considered the end point. If you adopted this approach, you would begin by gathering your information from your participants, which you then sort into categories and then into overarching themes. At some point, you would begin to develop a theory or a broad explanation for your observations. The final stages would be to compare your explanations with existing literature on the topic. This approach is usually associated with the term grounded theory. No matter which approach you adopt, you can see that the existing literature plays a very important part in your research. So, how do you start finding this literature? I've asked a few colleagues to give you their tips on how they begin.
Tip number one is, where do I start to look for information about my topic? In the olden days, we used to have to go to the library and go through big catalogues to try and find articles that were relevant to what we were interested in. Nowadays, we are luckier. We can go online and do a search. The temptation there is to just go on to Google and type in my search term there and see what it comes up with. That is not actually the best strategy when you are looking for academic outputs, articles, books, etc. Because Google normal searches tend to throw up a lot of stuff that is not relevant in an academic sense. For example, when I was much younger than today, I did a search on one of the early search engines that came out, and I was looking for articles on the topic of self-esteem. The whole first page that I came up with was all about breast enhancement clinics, not really what I was looking for in educational research terms. So, much better is to use Google Scholar, which is a specialized search engine for academic texts. It has one big disadvantage though, which is that it is not limited to any one field. So if you put in a search term, you may come up with articles from education, but also from science or mathematics or any other area, which can make it difficult sometimes to find the thing you're specifically looking for. A better database in that sense is called ERIC, which is specialized in education. You can find it on www.eric.ed.gov. That's a specialized database which only collects articles, books, conference presentations, etc. around educational topics. One of the problems you may get if you search is that you simply get too much material. So you can put in a search term and into ERIC or into Google Scholar and come up with thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of different articles. What do? Obviously you're not going to read all of those, so you need to narrow down your search. How do you do that? Two main ways. One is to narrow your search term. Say, for example, you are interested in transformational leadership. Well, that is obviously a topic that has been studied in a wide range of fields, business, education, military, etc. So you might want to make sure that you say transformational leadership in education or in military and narrow it down in that way. A second way is to narrow your search to a particular number of years. Your most recent articles are likely to be the most relevant and most up-to-date. So you could, for example, say, I'm only going to search for articles after 2008, say. That will again narrow your search down quite a bit. Final tip is what happens if I don't find enough material using my search term. That is less likely to occur because most topics have been written about quite extensively before, but if it does, you may want to start thinking about synonyms or related terms. For example, if you are interested in organizational improvement, you may put that search term in and not get that much. Think about other terms which may be very closely related to it or describe something very similar. Educational, organizational change, organizational reform, those kind of things. So try and think of what are related terms or synonyms to the one you put in originally.
The way I look for literature and the way I advise my students to look for literature is really influenced by my experience of doing systematic reviews. Some students know what systematic reviews are, but basically this is a very kind of prescribed, transparent way of searching and reviewing literature. It uses kind of a list of databases that you really communicate to your audience so that whoever's reading it knows which databases you've been to, which search terms you've used. And it's supposed to be replicable and it's supposed to be quite scientific and all the rest of it. But what you find when you do systematic reviews, of course, is that it's not at all like that. And when you search using search terms, on titles and abstracts, you soon realise that titles are actually really misleading, and that abstracts often don't have the basic things that you need, like what country was the research carried out in, with what age range, what kind of methods. So the things that you might need to know about a paper often are missing from abstracts and things. And I've really learnt from that. So now when I'm searching for literature, I kind of use some of those skills, you know, which I've got a sense now of which are good databases, and you have to use them to know which are good databases. I've got a sense of how to make good search terms. But I combine all of that with a much more kind of gut instinct, intuitive, roaming about way of finding things, because this kind of very linear route just doesn't get you where you want to be. Maggie McClure, I think it was, did a review, a critique of systematic review, and she said what people don't do is look over the hedges at the other papers that they might be interesting and they're just missing because they're doing this search terms, you know, very particular way of doing it. So now whenever I'm searching for literature, I'm really aware of looking over the hedges. You know, I found this thing, but actually that paper further down on the list looks really interesting. I would never have, you know, thought about that one, but that one looks good. So really kind of combining this formulaic approach with serendipity, instinct, chance. I think the most important thing really is that as you begin to search, you get an idea of who the important people are, which names come up, which journals come up, and it's building that familiarity so that you know you get a sense of what kind of search is going to work for you.
Okay, finally you get my tips. I proceed on several fronts. Firstly, I look for a monograph on my research area. A monograph is a scholarly essay or book written on a focused topic and is written essentially for researchers in that field. It's a step or two above a textbook, which is written primarily for students. My personal research focuses on the relationship between the employee and the organisation. So I look at concepts such as organisational commitment, culture, roles, and conflict. There are monographs written on each of these topics. The library or even Amazon are good places to find these topics. A monograph will provide me a thorough history of the topic and identify the main writers and the researchers in that area. However, it is unlikely that there will be anything written directly in my context of interest, which is higher education and non-profit organisations. But that is why that is why I'm studying it. Secondly, or actually concurrently, I go to Google Scholar. I type in a few words from my topic area, such as organisational conflict and higher education management. This will provide me a list of articles containing research very close to my area of interest. I then restrict it to articles published in the last 5 years, and then scan through and select one or two of the most promising articles. The literature review from each of these articles gives me the current state of research, and the reference list at the rear of this article provides me a further set of articles to explore. These two strategies give me a list of the main authors and the main journals that focus on my or similar topics. My final step is to go to each of the websites for that journal and search within that site for articles written by my authors or written on my topic.